Natalia, thank you for joining me here on Testing Insights. Why don't you first introduce yourself real quick? Tell me why you're relevant to talk about experimentation program management and what you're up to lately.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Natalia. I'm the VP of product at the Bouqs company. And I have been in product for the last 10 years. I've seen product evolve. I've seen experimentation evolve. And most recently working with a company called Spiro on really setting up a program where research and experimentation is core to what product is doing, and really refocusing the team away from execution as a success metric and insights as a success metric instead. And so that's kind of why where my passion for experimentation kind of comes from.
Well, yeah, I do see you a little bit as this bridge of like a product team and an experimentation team. Sometimes they're distinct, sometimes they're combined. We work with experimentation managers, sometimes growth managers, product managers.
Yeah.
It can, it depends on who you work with. And from my experience working with you and the team, I definitely see it as a bridge. My set of questions here for you, the three questions are around how your approach to that team management, the team alignment with regards to this function. And so my first question is, what are the kinds of rituals that you see working to orient and align your team, especially a new team, to this idea of insight as a success metric, to the idea of like using testing as a forcing function to make decisions?
Totally. Yeah. So it's been about 6 months since I've been with the Bouqs. And as I said, when I started, the focus was really on the team getting requests for execution and the team executing on those things. And what was happening was nobody was really seeing the results that they wanted from that. And the team was getting burnt out. And so what I did is I came in and I really started working through creating a phase gate process, really, that focused on the first 3 key milestones were all around research and validating assumptions and quantifying those assumptions. So in the first phase, really discovery, it orientates the product manager or anybody else who's working through this process on what is the user problem and how can we meet that problem. Really, the second phase, I see a lot of opportunity for experimentation outside of execution to live, which is the research phase. And in that phase, it really is like, how do we validate this opportunity? That's where you can start to do A/B testing around just like smaller things that aren't going to be the final product, but will get you quick answers to, is this even worth our time? When you have, 5 or 6 stakeholders and there's 5 or 6 things each of them are asking for, how do you cut through the noise and find things that are going to be valuable, not only to the customer, but to your stakeholder? And then in that third phase, which we call the business case phase, it's really saying, okay, we know this is a problem. We can validate this. How big of an opportunity is it for us to solve this problem? And that's really where you can start to see some of those MVP features as experimentation before you actually put into the like larger initiative, like levels of effort. So some of the things that we've been talking about is like potentially doing a really small version of like a favorites tool. It's probably something that's not going to be usable for a very long time, but we see enough data to say there might be value in this, but we might just build something that we would throw away to validate it and see a business case before we even move forward. So in those cases, what we're orienting the team around really is, did you learn something? Are you going to propel this idea? Or are you saving yourself time and nipping this in the bud and kind of refocusing and aligning on something that's probably of greater value?
Yeah, I see a little bit of a decision tree in there,
Yeah.
because the experimentation for learning versus the experimentation for optimizing the solution, basically.
Yep.
And maybe that solution kind of comes in like right at that third stage, the business case, whereas experimentation for learning is part of those initial couple stages.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Second question, you mentioned this phase gate process, and so it's the typical project management. What do you see? What role and skill set do you see as sort of really crucial in the linchpin for the internal testing program? So you know, and project management in my mind is like the easy thing of like
Yeah.
coming for. So I'm gonna like nip that, like not project management. What skill set are you on a soapbox about or really focused on right now with regards to this work?
Yeah, so there's two things that I think really make this program, or the role or skill set I need in my product managers, is one is like being the torch holder to hold people accountable to following this process. I think it's so easy to kind of like skip over the first two phases, come up with a really light business case that's not really rooted in learnings or research, and then just be like, let's execute and see what happens. So having the hard discussions of, we're going to go through this process. And sometimes that process only takes a day. Other times that process might take a few weeks, but holding that torch. And I think the second one is around the artifact of looking at this data over time and collecting it and putting a database together. So being very conscious of, it's not just about the learning for this particular problem that you're solving, but it's keeping that learning in a database for maybe something that we look at from another lens later down the line. And one of the things I say to my team is, you know, when you don't have data, you have to make a decision based off of either your gut or your stakeholders' gut. And what I want to do with a database of learnings is create a gut for all of us that we can just use as a gut check that isn't our own, that isn't just biased around us. And so that's kind of my vision for the artifacts of the learnings that we're getting throughout the process.
Yeah, at the heart of this, or actually where the dragons lie here, is that balance between confidence and speed, right? Like how can you, you know, and that's that knowledge management system. So so speak to that a little bit in terms of how your team is prioritizing the experimentation and research, and maybe some particulars, some maybe tactical particulars about that solution.
Yeah. So one of the things that, like I mentioned with this torch holder thing, is like really going to our stakeholders and talking through bringing a problem to the table versus a solution to the table. And, you know, the more you do it, the more you realize crafting the right problem statement is way harder than coming up with a solution. And so, you know, going back to that phase gate process, it's set up to help, you know, validate, are we, one, what is the problem? Is this the right problem? Is this problem worth solving right now? And to your point of speed, I think one of the things that we try to highlight when we lose, like when a test supposedly like loses, is we just saved a bunch of time. Like this is not worth solving right now. Celebrate the no just as much as you're celebrating the yes. And always going back to the problem. So just like throughout the process, it's like, okay, what is the problem? Is this problem? Do we know that this is the right problem? Is this worth solving right now? And then after the fact, after we actually execute, did this solve the problem? How well did this solve the problem? Do the customers even care about this? Like all of those things go into it. And so there's that whole speed thing, like it's so easy to get wrapped up in like, we launched something, that's great. Now we launch something else, we launch something else. But if you're just like basically treading water and launching for the sake of launching something, more likely than not, you're not going to get the results that you want. And then that's what breeds that frustration of like, well, we're doing all this stuff. Like, why are the numbers staying the same? And so really trying to orient the team around like saying no to things is as important as saying yes to things, as long as you are working on the right things.
Yeah, I just this weekend I finished the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown.
Oh, I haven't read that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. He just came out with a book Effortless, which is his #2 book, and I was like, oh, I really want to read that, but I need to read his first one first. And it's essentialism, and he harps again and again and again that book of just the power of a good question, but also the power to say no. And even through the experimentation priority frameworks that I'm used to using, it actually inspired me. This weekend I had this vision of like, okay, we come up with this prioritization matrix. Maybe we need the system to, you know, if you score it and it gets below a certain threshold, it actually goes out of view. Like you don't even see it. Like it just gets out of the, you know, it declutters the noise of what you're considering doing with the team. So interesting. That might be worth checking out along those lines. So.
Yeah, I've also heard a similar thing that like whenever, like if you have a brainstorm, you have all these ideas, you decide on doing some of the ideas and then some of them get deprioritized. The next time you come to a brainstorm, none of those deprioritized ideas get put back on yet.
Exactly.
They have to be put, yeah, exactly. Because like if they weren't a good idea then, like, and not good, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like there's hundreds of great ideas out there, but that's not the point. The point is finding the right one to work on at the right time.
And I love the question focus as well. Like if you can articulate and refine your question, that's like 80% of the battle.
Yep.
Focusing on big problems to get, that's what'll show, that's what'll make the needle move, is focusing on the bigger problems. Well, thank you, Natalia. Those are my 3 questions. Appreciate you jumping on. I think this is really valuable. I love it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.